The word sliced through the dinner conversation like a knife through butter. "Oh, Benita's always been such a help, like a house guest who never left." My adoptive mother Elaine laughed, swirling her third glass of Chardonnay. The crystal clinked against her rings as nervous chuckles rippled around the table. My fork slipped from my hand, clattering against the fine china. The dining room suddenly felt too small, too bright. Soft jazz played from hidden speakers, mocking the moment with its cheerfulness. This was supposed to be my brother Ryan's engagement dinner, a celebration. Instead, it became the night everything shattered. My adoptive father Martin leaned back in his chair, smirking at his cousin across the table. "Well, she's not real family anyway. You know how adoption goes, we did our part." He said it casually, like he was discussing the weather or stock prices. The laughter died instantly. My ears rang. Heat flooded my face. 20 years of pretending, of trying, of hoping collapsed in that single moment. Elaine noticed my expression and waved her hand dismissively. "Don't look so sensitive, dear. You knew your place." I stood up slowly, hands trembling. Every eye turned toward me. My voice came out quiet but steady. "You'll regret saying that one day." I walked out of that dining room with my head high, even though tears blurred my vision. The front door closed behind me with a soft click that felt like the end of a chapter. My whole body shook as I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel. My name is Benita Sterling. I'm 28 years old. And until tonight, I believed that love could be earned through hard work, through being good enough, through never complaining. My parents just proved me wrong in the cruelest way possible. The drive home passed in a blur. When I finally made it to my apartment, I collapsed on the couch and let myself cry. Not gentle tears, but the kind that comes from years of swallowed hurt finally breaking free. I cried for the little girl who thought she'd finally found a home. I cried for the teenager who tried so hard to belong. I cried for the woman who still, somehow, hoped things might change. But even through the tears, something else stirred inside me. Not just hurt, determination. They wanted to remind me I wasn't real family? Fine. I'd show them exactly what this house guest could become. I was 8 years old when the Sterlings chose me. I remember standing on their porch, clutching a pink backpack that held everything I owned. The social worker smiled encouragingly, her hand warm on my shoulder. The door opened, and there stood Elaine Sterling in a cream-colored dress, her smile bright but somehow cold. "Welcome home, sweetie," she said, but her eyes were already scanning past me to the social worker, checking if anyone was watching. Martin appeared behind her with a camera. "Let's get a photo for the adoption announcement," he said cheerfully. I didn't understand then what I know now. They wanted the photo, the story, the image of being generous people who rescued a poor foster child. They wanted the dinner party conversations where friends would call them saints. What they didn't want was an actual daughter. Ryan, their biological son, was 10. He looked at me from the staircase like I was an interesting but temporary science project. He never called me his sister. Not once in 20 years. That first night, I lay in the guest bedroom they'd converted into my room and whispered thank you to the ceiling. I thought I was lucky. I thought I'd finally found a family. The years passed, and I learned my role. I was the helpful one, the grateful one, the one who never asked for too much. Ryan got summer camps and sports equipment and college savings accounts. I got hand-me-down clothes and lectures about being thankful. Every achievement I earned was brushed aside. When I won the school science fair, Elaine said, "That's nice, dear," without looking up from her magazine. When I made honor roll every semester, Martin reminded me that education was a privilege I should appreciate. When I got accepted into the youth leadership program, they were too busy with Ryan's baseball tournament to attend the ceremony. I started keeping a diary hidden under my mattress. It was the only place I could tell the truth. "Today Mom forgot my birthday again," I wrote on my 13th year. Ryan got a car for his 16th. I got a card with $20 and a reminder to save it wisely. I learned to celebrate my victories alone, in the quiet of my room. I learned that love in the Sterling house was conditional, rationed, always just out of reach. And I learned to build walls around my heart, brick by brick, disappointment by disappointment. High school graduation should have been one of the proudest days of my life. I was valedictorian, giving the speech to 300 people in the hot June sun. I'd written it carefully, pouring hope and gratitude into every word. As I stood at the podium, I scanned the crowd for my parents' faces. They'd promised to come. Elaine had even bought a new dress for the occasion. But as I looked across the sea of families, of proud mothers wiping tears and fathers with cameras raised, I couldn't find them. My voice wavered for just a moment before I steadied myself. I delivered that speech with a smile that hurt my face. I shook the principal's hand, accepted my diploma, and walked across that stage alone. Later, I found out they'd gone to Ryan's baseball game instead. It was just a regular season game, nothing special. That night, I sat in my room and stared at my diploma. "Congratulations, Benita," I whispered to myself, because no one else would. Something hardened inside me that day. That was the first time I learned how to succeed without applause, without validation, without family. College acceptance letters arrived in April of my senior year. I got into a top university with a partial scholarship. I was so excited I could barely breathe. This was it, my chance to build something real, to become someone. I showed the letter to Martin at breakfast. He glanced at it, then at the tuition cost. "That's impressive, Benita. But we can't help financially. We've done enough raising you. You'll have to figure it out on your own." Elaine nodded, sipping her coffee. "You're 18 now, an adult. Time to be independent." She said it like she was doing me a favor, teaching me some valuable life lesson. Ryan sat across from me, not meeting my eyes. He'd already had his college funds secured since birth. I packed a small suitcase that night. I didn't take much, most of what I owned was theirs anyway, things they'd given me while reminding me to be grateful. I left before dawn, walking down the driveway one last time. Ryan's light was on in his room, but he never came to say goodbye. At 18, I learned that being adopted meant you could be discarded when you were no longer convenient. I rented a tiny attic room above a diner for $200 a month. It had a slanted ceiling, a single window, and no heat in winter. But it was mine. I worked the breakfast shift at the diner and the evening shift at a grocery store. Between jobs, I attended classes. Some nights, when the electricity got cut off because I couldn't pay the bill, I studied by candlelight. My roommate downstairs, an elderly woman named Mrs. Patterson, would sometimes leave me plates of food by my door. "You're too skinny," she'd say gruffly. "Eat something." She showed me more kindness in 6 months than the Sterlings had in 10 years. I cried the first time she did it, sitting on my creaky bed with a warm plate of spaghetti in my lap. This is what family feels like, I thought. Not blood or paperwork, but someone caring if you've eaten. Every struggle taught me something my parents never could: resilience, self-reliance, the quiet strength that comes from having no safety net. I promised myself something during those hard years. One day, they'll know my name. One day, they'll realize what they lost. College graduation came 4 years later. I walked across that stage with honors, my degree in data science clutched in my hands. Mrs. Patterson came, sitting in the audience with a bouquet of grocery store flowers. She was the only family I needed. I got a job at a small data analytics firm. The work was interesting. I loved finding patterns in numbers, predicting trends, solving problems that seemed impossible. My boss, a man named Victor, noticed my skills quickly. Too quickly, as it turned out. I spent 6 months developing a revolutionary approach to customer analytics. I worked nights and weekends, perfecting the algorithm, testing it until it sang. When I finally presented it to Victor, his eyes lit up with something that should have warned me. 2 weeks later, he presented my concept to investors as his own. He gave a polished presentation using my slides, my research, my breakthrough. When I confronted him privately, he smiled. "You're young. You'll have other ideas. This one needed someone with credibility to sell it. I quit that day. I didn't argue or fight. I simply walked out, taking my research notes with me. I had $3,000 in savings and a dream that everyone said was impossible. But I'd learned something important: when you're underestimated, you can work in silence, and nobody sees you coming. I registered my company from my apartment, Novometrics. The name meant rebirth, new beginnings, a star emerging from darkness. For the first 6 months, I lived on ramen noodles and hope. I sent proposals to small businesses, offering data solutions they could afford. My first client was a local bakery owner who wanted to understand his customer patterns. I charged him almost nothing, but I delivered results that increased his profits by 30%. He told his friend, who told another friend. Slowly, impossibly, Novometrics started to grow. I worked 18-hour days. I taught myself advanced programming. I hired my first employee, a brilliant coder named Jamie who believed in my vision. We worked from my apartment-turned-office, surviving on coffee and determination. "You're the calmest boss I've ever met," Jamie told me once, looking stressed about a deadline. I smiled. Calm was my armor. Calm was what happened when you'd survived the Sterling family. For 3 years, I lived like a ghost. I deleted my social media, changed my phone number, cut contact with everyone from my past. Every night, I looked at a childhood photo tucked in my desk drawer, 8-year-old me on the Sterling's porch, hopeful and trusting. "You'll be proud one day," I whispered to that little girl. "I promise." Novometrics grew steadily. We landed bigger clients, developed better algorithms, and built a reputation for solving impossible problems. Tech blogs started noticing our work. My inbox filled with inquiries from companies 10 times our size. Jamie hired 2 more developers. We moved into a real office, nothing fancy, but it had windows and heat and desks that didn't wobble. I bought my first professional suit and felt like an imposter wearing it. But I wore it anyway, shoulders back, chin up, the way I'd learned to walk through the Sterling house pretending I belonged. The world was finally noticing me. But I didn't tell anyone from my past. Not yet. Success tastes sweeter when it's earned in silence, when the people who doubted you discover it too late. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning. "Dear Miss Sterling, we'd like to feature Novometrics in our innovation spotlight." It was from TechVision, one of the biggest technology publications in the industry. My hand shook as I read it. Jamie found me staring at my computer screen. "Boss? You okay?" I laughed, a sound caught between joy and disbelief. "We're getting featured in TechVision." The article went live 2 weeks later. Within hours, my inbox exploded. Investors wanted meetings. Major corporations requested proposals. My phone rang constantly. We weren't a small startup anymore, we were players in the tech industry. I should have been celebrating, but all I could think was, they're going to see this. The Sterlings subscribed to TechVision. Martin read it religiously, always trying to sound informed at dinner parties. They would see my name, my company, my success. Part of me wanted to hide. But a bigger part, the part that had survived their rejection, wanted them to know. Wanted them to understand exactly what they'd thrown away when they told an 18-year-old girl to figure it out on her own. The envelope arrived at my office 3 days after the TechVision article. Heavy cream paper, expensive. Elaine's perfect cursive handwriting on the front. I stared at it for an hour before opening it. "Dear Anita, we saw the wonderful article about your success. We're so proud of you, darling. We always knew you had potential. Let's reconnect, we've missed you terribly. Love, Mom." Mom. She'd never called herself that before. It was always Elaine or Mrs. Sterling. I read the letter 3 times, looking for sincerity and finding only strategy. They weren't proud, they were worried about how it looked that their adopted daughter was making headlines while they hadn't spoken to her in years. Jamie found me in my office at midnight, the letter still in my hands. "Old ghosts?" she asked gently. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. She squeezed my shoulder and left quietly. I put the letter in my desk drawer, unread. But it stayed in my mind, burning like a brand. They wanted back in now that I was valuable, now that I could be used for their social currency. The audacity was almost impressive. 6 months later, Forbes called. We're compiling our 30 under 30 list for technology innovators. Your name came up repeatedly. I actually laughed out loud, which probably seemed unprofessional. But the woman on the phone laughed too. I'll take that as a yes? The photo shoot felt surreal. Professional lights, makeup artists, a silk blouse I'd never have afforded 5 years ago. The photographer kept telling me to relax, but how do you relax when your wildest dream is coming true? The article came out in September. There I was, full-page photo, under the headline, From Foster Home to Forbes, Anita Sterling, CEO of Novometrics. The journalist had uncovered my background, foster care, adoption, struggling through college. She'd written it beautifully, sympathetically, making me sound brave instead of broken. Jamie bought 10 copies. We hung one in the office. I sent one to Mrs. Patterson, who cried and called me her bonus granddaughter. I kept one for myself, proof that the scared 18-year-old in the attic room had survived. The rest I gave to my team. I didn't send one to the Sterlings. I didn't need to. I knew they'd see it. According to my former neighbor who still lived near the Sterlings, Elaine nearly fainted when someone showed her the Forbes article at the country club. She'd been playing tennis when another member approached, magazine in hand. Isn't this your daughter? How exciting. Elaine apparently froze, then recovered with theatrical flair. Oh my goodness, yes. We're so proud of her. She spent the rest of the afternoon telling anyone who'd listen about our Anita and how they'd always supported her dreams. The lies spread through their social circle quickly. Suddenly I was the beloved adopted daughter they'd nurtured and encouraged. The same people who'd heard them dismiss me for years now heard a completely different story. Some believed it. Others, who remembered the truth, stayed quiet out of politeness. Martin called an emergency meeting with Ryan that evening. We need to fix this before people start asking why she never visits, he told his son. The problem wasn't that they'd hurt me, it was that their cruelty might now reflect badly on them. The hypocrisy would have been funny if it didn't hurt so much. My phone rang on a Thursday afternoon. Unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Anita? Honey, it's Mom. Elaine's voice was syrupy sweet, dripping with false warmth. My hand tightened on the phone. What do you want, Elaine? The use of her first name was deliberate. She noticed, there was a pause before she continued. We've missed you so much, sweetheart. We saw the Forbes article. We're so proud. Proud? My voice came out flat. You called me a charity case. You said I wasn't real family. You told me to figure life out on my own when I was 18. Silence. Then, predictably, tears. We didn't mean it that way. You misunderstood. We were teaching you independence. I almost laughed at the revisionist history. Is that what we're calling it now? More sobbing. Please, Anita. Let's meet. Let us explain. We were wrong. There it was, the admission I'd once desperately wanted. But it rang hollow, strategic, timed perfectly to coincide with my success. Still, I found myself saying, fine. Let's meet. I'd love to catch up. My tone was pleasant, professional. Elaine brightened immediately. Oh, wonderful. How about dinner next Friday? The restaurant was expensive, the kind of place the Sterlings loved, all white tablecloths and hushed conversations. They arrived together, Martin in his best suit, Elaine dripping in pearls, Ryan uncomfortable in a blazer. They hugged me like we'd never been apart. Martin ordered wine like we were celebrating. Elaine gushed about how beautiful I looked, how successful, how they'd always known I'd do great things. The lies came easily to them. Ryan, surprisingly, was the most honest. Heard you're doing well with your company. Got any investment tips? At least he was direct about wanting something from me. Martin launched into stories about their struggling real estate business, clearly hoping I'd offer help. Elaine kept touching my arm, performing affection. I listened, smiled, asked polite questions. Under the table, my phone buzzed with a text from my assistant. The acquisition went through. Building is officially yours. I read it calmly, then looked up at Martin, who was still talking about his business problems. Where's your office located again? I asked innocently. The Morrison Building on 5th Street, he said. We've been there 15 years. I nodded thoughtfully. That's a nice building. I didn't mention that I'd just bought it. 3 days later, Martin received a letter from the building's new ownership. Novometrics had purchased the Morrison Building as part of our expansion. All existing leases would be honored, but new terms needed to be negotiated. He called me immediately. Anita, did you know about this? His voice was tight. About what? I asked, though I knew exactly what. The Morrison Building. Your company bought it. We're your tenants. I let the silence stretch before responding. Oh, that acquisition. Yes, we finalized it last week. Don't worry, Dad, the word tasted bitter. I'm sure we can work out fair lease terms. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. The man who'd told me to figure things out on my own was now at my mercy. This is awkward, Martin said finally. It doesn't have to be, I replied pleasantly. Business is business, right? That's what you taught me. We both knew what I meant. He'd treated me like a business transaction my entire childhood, charitable investment with diminishing returns. Now I was treating him the same way. I heard Elaine's voice in the background, demanding to know what was wrong. Martin made an excuse to end the call quickly. Elaine went into damage control mode. She started posting on social media for the first time in years, sharing old photos of me as a child with captions like "Always knew our girl was special" and "Proud mom moment." Ryan posted a family photo, tagging Novometrics' official page. My PR team panicked. Should we ask him to take it down? It's getting a lot of attention. I looked at the post, Ryan's arm awkwardly around teenage me, both of us clearly uncomfortable. The comments were interesting. Some people congratulated him. Others asked why they'd never seen family posts before. Leave it up, I told my team. Let them embarrass themselves. Jamie looked at me curiously. You're playing chess while they're playing checkers, aren't you? I smiled but didn't answer. The truth was, I didn't need to destroy them. They were destroying themselves, rewriting history so clumsily that people were starting to notice the inconsistencies. Old neighbors, former classmates, people were beginning to tell the real story in comment sections and private messages. The narrative the Sterlings were trying to build was crumbling under the weight of truth. Novometrics' 5th anniversary gala was Jamie's idea. We should celebrate how far we've come, she said. Invite clients, partners, press. Make it big. I agreed, but I had my own reasons for wanting a public event. I designed the invitations myself, elegant, cream-colored cards with silver lettering. I sent one to Martin and Elaine, handwritten. It would mean a lot to have family there. The word family was deliberate, a test to see if they'd recognize the irony. Elaine called within hours of receiving it. We'd be honored to attend. She sounded genuinely excited. Martin got on the phone too. This is wonderful, Anita. See? We're all moving past the misunderstandings. They interpreted the invitation as reconciliation, as proof that I'd forgiven them, that their new narrative was working. Ryan texted. Mom says this means you're ready to be family again. I stared at that message for a long time. Ready to be family again, as if I'd been the one who'd left, who'd rejected them. The lack of self-awareness was stunning. I typed back, see you at the gala. Nothing more. The night of the gala, I stood backstage in a white dress that cost more than a month's rent in my old attic room. My hands were steady as I held my speech notes. Jamie peeked through the curtain. Full house. Your parents are in the front row, looking very proud. Are you nervous? She asked, turning back to me. I smiled, calm washing over me like a wave. No. I've waited my whole life for this. She didn't understand what I meant, but she squeezed my hand anyway. You've got this, boss. The ballroom was beautiful, crystal chandeliers, round tables with white roses, 200 people in formal wear. I'd invited clients, employees, investors, and press. Local news cameras were set up in the back. Everything was perfect. As I walked onto the stage, applause erupted. The spotlight was bright and warm. I found the Sterlings in the front row immediately, Martin in his tuxedo, Elaine in a designer gown, Ryan beside them. They were smiling, waving slightly, playing the role of proud family. This was it. The moment I'd been building toward for years. Thank you all for coming, I began, my voice steady and clear. 5 years ago, Novometrics started in my tiny apartment with nothing but a laptop and a dream. Tonight, we're celebrating not just a company, but a journey. The audience listened intently. I told them about the early struggles, the first clients, the moment we realized we might actually succeed. I thanked my team, my mentors, the people who believed in me. Then my tone shifted, became more personal. I used to believe family was something you had to earn, I said slowly. That if you were good enough, smart enough, grateful enough, you could make people love you. Elaine's smile faltered slightly. Martin shifted in his seat. But I learned something important over these 5 years. Real family isn't about blood or paperwork. It's not about who claims you when you're successful. My eyes met theirs directly. True family is built, not born. It's the people who show up when you have nothing to offer them. The room was silent now, everyone sensing something important was happening. That's why, I continued, my voice growing stronger, Novometrics' first charitable initiative will donate $1 million to organizations supporting foster and adopted children who are told they aren't real family. The room erupted. Applause thundered through the ballroom. People stood, cheering. Camera flashes went off like lightning. I saw reporters scribbling frantically. Through it all, I kept my eyes on the Sterlings. Elaine had gone pale. Martin's expression was frozen somewhere between shock and understanding. Ryan looked between his parents and me, finally comprehending. They knew. Everyone in that room who knew them, who'd heard their country club stories about their beloved adopted daughter, now understood the truth. I didn't name them. I didn't have to. The speech said everything without saying anything at all. This foundation, I added, is for every child who's been told they should be grateful just to be chosen. You deserved better. You always did. More applause, louder now. Some people were crying. I smiled softly, graciously, and walked off stage, calm, poised, finally free. The next morning, headlines everywhere, tech CEO's emotional speech goes viral, Novometrics founder announces foster care initiative, adopted entrepreneur's powerful message of resilience. The video of my speech had millions of views within hours. My phone wouldn't stop ringing, interview requests, donation offers, messages from adopted children thanking me. The foundation I'd announced became real overnight, with funding pouring in from unexpected sources. But the story everyone wanted was the one behind my words. Some journalists figured it out quickly. They called the Sterlings for comment. Martin and Elaine didn't answer. Their social media went dark. Friends stopped calling them. Their business partners, the ones who'd seen the gala, started asking uncomfortable questions. The truth spread through their world like wildfire. They'd rejected their adopted daughter, pushed her out at 18, then tried to reclaim her when she became successful. Their carefully constructed lie collapsed under the weight of my silence. I never publicly named them. I didn't need to. The story told itself. 3 weeks after the gala, Martin appeared at my office. My assistant buzzed me, uncertain. Your father is here. He doesn't have an appointment. I almost said he's not my father, but instead I said, send him in. He looked older, tired, smaller somehow. He sat across from my desk, the same desk where I'd once read his letter saying they couldn't help with college. Benita, he started, then stopped. What do you say when you realize you've made the biggest mistake of your life? We were wrong, he finally managed. About everything. I'm sorry. I studied him, this man who'd once made me feel like a burden. What are you sorry for specifically? He flinched. For making you feel unwanted. For treating you differently than Ryan. For that dinner, those words. For not being a father, I added quietly. He nodded, tears in his eyes. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know, we're proud of you. Truly proud. I stood, signaling the meeting was over. Thank you for saying that. But I don't need your pride anymore. I built something without it. 6 months later, I hosted a dinner at my new apartment, the penthouse I'd bought in the building where I'd once rented an attic room. Mrs. Patterson sat at the head of the table. Jamie and my team filled the other seats. These were my people, my chosen family. We laughed over wine and pasta, sharing stories and dreams. No one was performing, pretending, or keeping score. This was what family felt like, warm, genuine, safe. Mrs. Patterson raised her glass, her wrinkled hand steady. To Benita, who taught us that family is built, not inherited. To real family, I agreed, clinking glasses around the table. The kind we choose. Everyone drank, and in that moment, I felt something I'd never felt in the Sterling house. I belonged. Not because I'd earned it through perfect behavior or grateful speeches, but simply because I was loved for who I was. Later, alone on my balcony, I looked at the city lights and thought about 8-year-old me on that porch with a pink backpack. We made it, I whispered. They tried to make us feel small. Instead, they made us unforgettable. The Sterlings had taught me something valuable after all, that real strength comes from surviving rejection, that success tastes sweeter when you build it yourself, and that family isn't about who raises you, but who refuses to leave. I'd found my real family. And I'd never felt more at home.